Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Mitra. I'm the Senior Managing Editor for the Texas Tribune. Welcome to those joining us in person here at the beautiful El Paso Museum of Art, and those as well joining us online for our program today titled We the Texans, Art and Democracy. We are thrilled to have this conversation, which is part of our We the Texans project, looking at the state of democracy in Texas. We're going to hear from some amazing artists and El Paso residents about why they're inspired to do the work they do and how they see their role in driving dialogue, activism, and change here in Texas. We're joined this afternoon by artist Camila Abbud, 2022-23 Texas Poet Laureate Lupe Mendez, and Stephen Engel, co-founder of Creative Kids. Moderating the program, please, by all means. Yes. Thanks for being here. I'm thrilled to be joined here by my colleague Matt Ewald, who will be moderating the program today. He's our Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Our program will run about an hour with 45 minutes for conversation among the panelists, as well as giving 15 minutes for your questions, as well as questions coming in from online. Here in El Paso, we have mics set up for our in-person audience Q&A, and our virtual audience can also submit questions online on our Q&A portal, texastribune.org/ask. That's texastribune.org/ask. We cannot do events like this or the journalism that we do without the support of our sponsors, and we are grateful for their support. Our major sponsors here include Raise Your Hand Texas, Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, Walmart, Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in El Paso, Texas Cultural Trust, Every Texan, HCA Healthcare, and Las Palmas del Sol Healthcare. Supporting sponsors include Paso del Norte Health Foundation, El Paso Community College, the Law Office of Carlos Eduardo Cardenas, and CREED. Our foundation sponsor is the Henry Luce Foundation. I also want to thank those who are here who are Tribune members. To learn more and become a member of the Tribune, visit texastribune.org/support. A couple of quick plugs. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., we convene at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center and online for a day-long symposium on, you're going to love this title, What the Rest of Texas Can Learn from El Paso. You can learn more about this symposium and several other upcoming events at texastribune.org/events. And we've just announced this week that tickets are on sale for our breakout politics and policy event, the Texas Tribune Festival, which returns to downtown Austin from September 5th through 7th. You can join us for 3 days of unforgettable conversations like today's about issues that matter to Texans at our annual celebration of big and bold ideas. You can purchase your tickets at trib.it. Now, before we turn the program over to the panel, we'd also just like to give an extreme thank you to the El Paso Museum of Art for hosting our conversation today. And offering a welcome on behalf of the museum is Director Edward Hayes, Jr.
Ian, thank you. And Matt, thank you so much to you and your team for bringing this event to an art museum. Of all the opportunities, amazing spaces in cities, you've selected El Paso, you've selected the El Paso Museum of Art as a place to have this really incredible conversation with some creatives and thinkers, citizens. So we're honored to have you all here. I do want to plug the exhibition that we have in our galleries, our Border Biennial, a collaboration with the Museo de Arte de Ciudad Juárez and the El Paso Museum of Art. Yeah. The installation closes in Juárez on April 14th, so please go see it before it closes. We will extend the exhibition here at EPMA through April 21st. And the Border Biennial, by the way, this is an exhibition that Camila is participating in. So please, yes, see her work. We have the work of 50 artists, and it's over 100 works of art presented here at EPMA. It is the largest Border Biennial of its kind, and it's back after 5 years. I believe there may be some journalists in the room. I do want to share that this exhibition has drawn a lot of attention. We've had stories in Texas Monthly. We had, a journalist from the New York Times just over a month ago. So there's a story coming out soon there. Please, if you're a journalist and you want to dive deep into a multifaceted perspective of the border, what better way than through art and through the Border Biennial? So please, following the panel or throughout the week, please come check out the 2020, what year are we in? Thank you. I'm already thinking about the 2026 Biennial. That's what's happening. Come and join us and come see this amazing Border Biennial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Edward. Now let's just quickly get to know our panel. Camila Abbud is a multidisciplinary artist, cultural organizer, and curator based here in El Paso. Her work is featured, as Edward mentioned, in the El Paso Museum's 2024 Border Biennial. Sitting next to Camila is Stephen Engel, the creative director and co-founder of Creative Kids, a 25-year-old nationally recognized creative youth development program that positively impacts under-resourced populations in El Paso and the region. And finally, Lupe Mendez is an internationally published writer, author of the award-winning book of poetry, Why I Am Like Tequila, and served as poet laureate for the state of Texas in 2022 and 23. He founded Tintero Projects, which works with emerging Latinx writers and other writers of color within the Texas Gulf Coast region. And again, moderating our conversation today is Matt Ewalt, the Director of Events and Live Journalism at the Tribune. He joined the Tribune in March 2023 after previously working at Chautauqua Institution in Western New York. I'd love to thank you all for being here in person and online, and for this wonderful panel for what they're about to present. And with that, I turn the program over to Matt.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you all for being here, and thanks to all joining us online. As Ian had shared in his introduction, our work with the Texans Project is engaging Texans in conversation about challenges to democracy here in Texas, but also how Texans are working to affect change. And this afternoon, we want to look at multiple ways in which art and artists are playing a role in shaping communities here in Texas, of giving voice, of community building and establishing a sense of belonging, providing perspectives other than our own, challenging our assumptions and biases, and art as a form of resistance. And Camila, I want to start with you. As Ian had mentioned, you're one of the featured artists here in the museum's Border Biennial, which is curated to reflect, quote, on the unique identity of the borderland and explores how artists define the region and what it means to them. Can you share with us how you approached your work in the exhibition, just to get us started?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I have a painting up in the exhibition right now. It's called Puente Libre 1. It's the first one of a series that came from that painting. And that painting is sort of what started a chain of reflections and questionings of the bridge itself. So the Puente Libre is one of the bridges that we have here in El Paso, Juarez. And I was really interested in exploring the dynamics in between infrastructure and the people that traverse that infrastructure, because I grew up crossing this bridge, but it was very cotidiano, it was very daily life. So I had no space to question it. It was just part of my life. But as I've formed myself as an artist and I guess as a thinker, I've been questioning how the marks and the debris and the dirtiness of infrastructures like El Puente can tell the stories of the people here. And yeah, that's kind of my train of thought. I also think the bridge itself is really, really bizarre once you step away from just going through it as something that's cotidiano. So I was telling Matt earlier that one of the frameworks that I try to follow as an artist and as a curator is creating works or exhibitions that can be both a window or a mirror for people to see into the perspective of a lifestyle. So I try to only speak for my vivencias, my lifestyle here in this very unique place. And all I want is for other people to feel seen, and other people that don't understand to be interested in question.
Stephen, you and your wife created, even founded Creative Kids 25 years ago. Can you speak to the impact of the program and who you serve? I mean, you've shared with me that it goes well beyond education, that it's not about creating the next 100,000 Picassos. What is that mission grounded in, and how do you consider the kind of impact that has had?
Yeah, so, I mean, when we started 25 years ago, the idea was just an artist, and my wife, my beautiful wife, was a special ed teacher at that time. And I went out to teach one of her classes in a BIC unit. These are the kids that, are dealing with some severe disability. And what I figured out after the first day is I loved that interaction. And one of the kids that hadn't spoken in like 10 years asked for the color red. And when that happened, I realized we were doing something good. And that became working with kids with cancer and after-school programs and partnering with the Boys and Girls Club and figuring out niches in the housing authority and doing that, 5 years straight without paying yourself, just doing it. And then after that, I realized this was kind of what I loved to do. And there was no, I guess, career path at UTEP making this. So you had to go for it. And I just went for it. And I thought it was such an experience. Not only did the kids get something, but I got something. And with that time going on, now we've branched out into other communities like Fabens and San Eli. And we're now franchising to New Mexico because we're finding that we're making a difference, not only in education, but giving kids what they need emotionally or the feeling of success. And I think it's more than the art that they get out of that. It's more about the camaraderie that they get, the feeling of satisfaction of doing it from their own hands and their own mind. And it's gratifying. It's just a good thing to do.
You referenced, beyond the art itself, the process that may help a child or an adult for that matter, which I want to get to, in dealing with certain emotions. Can you speak to the role of art for this community following the Walmart shootings and the specific work you have done with families and will continue, as you've told me, to do with families, and also the role of memorials in this community when it comes to dealing with horrific tragedy?
Yeah, so after that, horrible thing that happened here, the FRC, which is another community partner we work with, started engaging with activities that could kind of release some anger and give you some joy. And we started off with just 50 kids, and that was year one. We're now in year 4, almost 5. And we saw changes, and so did the parents, and so did the workers that are out there. They're called navigators that go to the houses and so on. And at the time, it was during the pandemic. And so we were shipping material to their doorstep, and then I would get online and say, hey, guys, how's it going? We're going to paint today. And what I noticed is the parents were also asking for supplies, too. So we packed some supplies for them, and they kicked off another partnership and program because the parents were saying, why can't I paint? And so we started teaching the adults. But I saw some really dark things come out. I saw some really good things come out and be relieved from. But it's something that I think those families that went through that will never heal from. They can only kind of get better. It's a long process. But the memorial that was put out by the city and the county and some of the things that happened at Walmart were kind of symbols that to the community that this is something we need to think about. We need to think about gun violence. We need to think about how we treat each other. We need to think about how people view us on the border. And what are we doing that's positive to change that? And this is the effect of what's happened to these kids and these adults in their lives. And it has changed them. So that's just one of the things that I think is one of the best programs that has been done. And we're creating a toolkit because mass shootings are going on all over the country. So one of the things we're putting on our platform that we're doing is this toolkit of how we started and what impact art can do for another community.
Yeah, it's a reminder that as attention unfortunately turns to the next tragedy, a community is continuing and will for a very long time. And the tools you've provided are having an impact. Lupe, I'd love to start with your telling us more about the kind of public role of a poet laureate in Texas. You know, and that was for 2 years, right? And just tell me a bit about what that role is and what you got from that experience.
Buenas tardes, good evening. Thank you everybody for joining us both online and in person. I will, in full transparency, say that the Poet Laureate position for the state is a free internship. Aside from the tip of the hat that you have the position, there is no thing provided to the individual who's Poet Laureate. None of the state artists are provided with anything else other than the title. And so depending on who that individual is, they can take the title and just absorb the accolades for it, or they can turn around and continue doing some kind of work. I giggle because I took it upon myself to do a full year's worth of venturing out into different cities across the state and running writing workshops. And in other interactions, I will also take the moment to point out that this state chooses to not fund the arts appropriately. And so when I go out and say, hey, I'm hosting a writing workshop in Amarillo, I will get a few people that would say, you're the Poet Laureate? That's awesome. And other people will say, the poet what? And so it's a very, explaining, it's an elevator pitch every time I go into a different community. Some spaces are running smoothly with arts and other spaces aren't. And so it's you get what you get when you go and do this work in the community in different formats. It was a humbling experience, an amazing opportunity. I get people are like, how great was that? I was like, it was free. It was free. It was free. I paid things. I flew. I took Pepto. I was on planes. It was awesome. I was driving my car to different spots. I got to see the state, which is beautiful, in ways that I hadn't seen it before. And at I think the one thread that the three of us are moving towards is getting to find ways to engage the public in thought or conversation, or build community through art. And I think that for me was the salt of it.
So can I follow up with it? You identify yourself both as an educator and an activist. And I'm wondering if you can, how do you distinguish the two?
In my earlier year, I'm about to be 48 in November. Yay, Gen X. When I was younger, I used to compartmentalize because it used to be uncomfortable. I didn't want people who knew me as an educator to know me as an activist or a poet, and vice versa across all three forms. I thought that it was a small smidget pace of control over making sure that not everything jumbled in together and ruined whatever things I was planning in each focal point. But at the start of a certain individual's presidency, it kind of all went to trash, and I had to meld all of the different ways that I was organizing and building community. It had to all come together. I stopped putting up the barriers. I was also in my 40s, so at that point I was like, screw it. It was very much, I had to use the tools that I understood as an activist, along with the tools as I knew as an educator, along with the tools as I knew as a writer, to make some kind of change in all three communities. And it was a very uplifting and freeing experience to just not give a damn anymore and just put it. It eventually all kind of fed each other. I'm applying all the things that I've known in the past into the curriculum that I'm writing for the students that I teach and the community that I work with to build art and readers and knowledge.
Yeah. Stephen, you had already touched on the kind of narratives people can build in their head, or narratives that can be fed. And you've also shared with me the idea of art to challenge those widespread narratives and to combat narratives of fear-based narratives. Can you share more about that as it pertains to El Paso and the border region?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you watch CNN or you're engaged in any format of looking at the media or even the political agenda at the Capitol, a lot of things are steered out of fear. The fear of not getting reelected, the fear that you say something that might become an argument with another person that doesn't agree. And that is kind of translated to institutions, because we start at the top of the Capitol. You know, when you go to Washington, D.C., and you're sitting in the Senate or the Congress or any of these executive branch, they're making decisions on their welfare as well as, can I hang in and get reelected? Sometimes they'll put their neck out, you know, to do something right, but there's no communication and no conversation on what's the good of the people. So that translates down to institutions, school, education, into museums, what they can show because their funders might not like it, what they can teach at a school because they don't want them to read it. All of those things, I think, are based out of fear. What will this do? What do I think? But really resolving those issues is coming to consensus and figuring out a nice balance. And I always think this about art. It's like, you might love my work or hate my work, but if any of those emotions happen, we started a conversation within you, but also within the community. And then you have to come together and talk about that. And I think that's what's lacking, and I think that's what art does, is it provides a voice for something you might not agree with, as well as something you kind of want to think about and come to your own conclusion. And if you stand in front of a painting, it's the same thing if you're watching something on CNN or, you know, any of those channels, C-SPAN, they're arguing, but they're not coming to a middle ground. And that's why we don't move forward. And that's why we're not as strong as we could be in democracy. And I think art plays a big role in that, to open people's minds, but gives them another point of view they should think about.
Is, in that respect, is art, that relationship with art, a form of listening?
I think you're listening to yourself, but I also think it's the people that are in that space with you that you get to hear something. Or you go home and talk to your family about what you experienced that day or saw that day. Or even better, you're sitting in a forum like this and you're saying, okay, let's talk about some issues that, how does art and democracy even fit? I mean, why are we doing this thing? But somewhere in between, somebody's going to connect the dots and see education and art and what's happening in the Capitol, and some of the circumstances that are happening in Juarez have been shown on TV because we have these kind of burials that are there, or white crosses are there, all these symbols that are being put out. Recently, one of the clinics that was over in Juarez had burned down. And I think I mentioned to you that there was a priest and a group of people over there that had a memorial and that was put out there. I think a lot of people forgot, but they didn't. And so they brought awareness to make people think about, hey, this is still here and this is going on.
Camila, you told me, you know, the way in which you look at that art is an opportunity for impact that other aspects of democracy can't reach. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. Well, this idea isn't mine. I learned it from poet Mahogany L. Brown, and she talked about the way that art has the capacity to reach hearts and switch ideologies in ways that policies don't have the capacity to, I believe. I feel like it's a ground for questioning. It's a ground for imagining the worlds that we want to live in. I think that art has that opportunity that other places in democracy, for example, need a place in. So yeah, I would say that art has that specific opportunity to reach hearts, to change minds, but not change minds as an elixir. I think like you were saying, art is an opportunity to have conversations. And personally, I have a hard time understanding this border, for example. There's so many questions I have and so little answers. And I feel like my process in art making is just the question, and sometimes I don't even know if I'm gonna get the answer, you know? But I think it's really important to keep asking questions.
Yeah. Lupe, I want to talk a bit about art as resistance, and the role of resistance and activism through art. In 2012, you helped to create a movement of writers, artists, educators, and activists highlighting the attack on books, educators, and education in Arizona. And as you've said, you've seen the same movement in Texas. Can you talk about the role of art in that process? What does that mobilizing look like?
When 2012, we started the Libro Traficante movement, which is basically book trafficker. And it was a group of 30-something individuals who very nerdily collected a bunch of books, got on a bus, and drove those books to the kids in Tucson, Arizona, after their ethnic studies program had been closed down by the state. It was against the law at the time. But what we noticed, and the power that was there, was in just trading a book into the hands of somebody else. Like the very act of asking publishing houses and authors to, hey, give us the materials that you created so that we can impart them to other people for free. And it worked. It caught the attention of the media. It was the nerdiest. It was a book drive. It was a basic book drive, and we crossed 6 cities, El Paso included. The largest book bash that we created was here in El Paso. And at the time, we were working out of Houston. We all had picked a different city that we would kind of try to help figure out what the things would be in town. And I had reached out to compañeros from here, and in an email chain, somebody said, hey, wait, I think it's the first time that we've all worked together on the same thing. And in Houston, it blew our minds that here we are, the 4th largest city in the world, and we have the same issue where we don't all get together on the same page about a thing. But seeing it happen in other cities, and then that lightning in a bottle, when it hits. The event here at the Mayapan was about 400 people deep, and there were other artists creating art on the spot. There were other individuals collecting oral histories. There were other individuals trading books, book signings. And so what it does is, as a form of resistance, when we think of resistance, we don't think about art making, but it's the pivotal point at which you hit the brakes on everything that's happening, and you investigate, and you begin to question, and you begin to organize and collect a thought. And that art making process can never be taken away. It does not. Art is art regardless of who's making the art. Whether or not it's a paid for thing is later and a byproduct, right? And so once the level of resistance occurs is when you can teach one another in the mode, in a medium, that they then can control the narrative of how a thing is depicted. That is the grit of the thing. That is the silent part of art making. We talk about resistance and we talk about revolution in terms of rallies and parades, but we don't talk about what happens behind the closed doors where the light's on and you're just steady at work, sweating it and creating a thing for your own consumption or the consumption of the public. And none of it has to be a dollar amounted thing to be processed.
We've been talking about the role all of you have as artists and creators, but I'm wondering about that other side of experiencing art and being moved. especially since we have certain disciplines represented here, but certainly not all. What is there particular work or piece or moment that that you recall that moved you, especially that may fall out of your particular craft?
Well, personally, growing up here, I have really admired the work of Les Dos. There are a couple of muralists that do community murals, and I think they truly represent the people from here. And when I was little, I would see their murals over here in El Paso or in Juarez, and I would look up to them and think, oh, this is here. Like, I started to value creating something that meant like home, I believe. It felt really special, especially because murals have that public artwork impact, right? That they're huge and they're innately for the people that cross it, not for someone that has the privilege of having time to walk into a museum from a 9 to 5, and yeah, I think murals have that chance to glorify, or not glorify, but give a lot of importance to something. And to see murals like that here, it was really impactful for me, I believe.
Well, for me, I mean, there's so many good artists in El Paso that are not seen, but there's a lot of them out there. But, well, I mean, there's certain situations where you get the opportunity to show your work, or in my case, because I'm devoted to our institution and what our mission and purpose is, I don't have time to set up other shows besides working and doing something that's, beneficial for the kids. So we're doing a set of pieces for the new Children's Museum that are sculptures that are in there, but that's a group thing. But to answer your question, my favorite guy is Luis Jimenez, because he taught for 30 years kids at Bowie High School, and he would draw at night, but he was teaching those kids a lot of good values of hard work and discipline and what it takes, as well as the talent that was being passed by, but he saw it, and they got engaged. But another thing is he turned it around. Like, he not only left teaching after 30 years, but he's in the Portrait National Gallery. This guy is no slouch. He's been in this museum a lot of times, and he's a great guy. He's a good person. But if he can do it, I mean, it shows others, not only in our community, but, in the national spotlight, that El Paso's got something to say, and we're pretty good.
I want to say just at the end of the month in October, after everything that had occurred in Palestine and Israel, one of the most uniquely collaborative moments that I think I'd seen in a while, one of our local danza groups had organized a vigil for Palestinian youth who had, at that point, had passed away due to the bombing. And so it was this uniquely beautiful vigil, full of candlelight, but a multitude of languages, offering prayers and blessings. And it was a full danza ceremony, and every danzante had taken a moment to connect with Palestinian youth organizers from the University of Houston. And so their group came to speak a few words, as well as a Jewish student group as well. And so now you had, I want to say, 150 folks at Houston's Guadalupe Plaza, which has always been a pivotal place for community and a moment of like speaking and congregation, that on this one night, full of a beautiful breeze, just a lot of well-spoken word and well-meaning things. Myself and poet Fadi Judah were invited poets to read that evening, and so to be able to share that space and that artistry in multiple ways was like a rock solid thing that sticks out for me.
I had mentioned the work the Tribune has been doing with the We the Texans project, and part of that has been really trying to position ourselves to listen to communities, their views on challenges to democracy. And many talk about a feeling of powerlessness, of skepticism about where they're getting information, where things are going, a frustration that they aren't represented well statewide, and yet there's an optimism locally. And I'm just wondering if you feel as if the arts reflect some of this right now, and is there a role for the arts in, if the right word is, remedying it or confronting it right now? And for anyone to answer.
I think it's always done that work. I think it's the reason why other countries, like the first individuals that are either locked up or shot, are your philosophers, your clergy, your teachers, and your artists and your journalists. Like, it's the people who get the news out in the ways that make people stand and stay shook about that thing. Is it doing something and providing some kind of moment of hope? Hell yeah. I think anytime, all the conversations that are occurring about, and I can speak on what's happening with books across the state, there's a pushback. Like, there's this wave of things that happen and people are like, how is that happening right now? And then a month or two later, like, things are pushed back. Elections, even the state of Texas, when it came to school boards, whatever the Moms for Liberty, whatever the groups that were funding candidates so they could take over school board seats in certain different pretty conservative neighborhoods and spaces, they got rejected in the last election. And it did not do what they thought it was going to do. And so that, in part, is the information that's going out in the public. It's old school things that are happening currently that, even though you might not feel like you have a hand on the voting end, it is creating a sit-in where you're reading books in front of your school district and reading books to kids and letting them see this is what we can do right now at this moment. It's developing neighborhood little libraries. You ever see the little libraries by people's houses where take one, leave one, whatever? That is a thing of resistance. When we were working with the Libre Traficante movement and the caravan, we had created, on the return trip, we created 3 underground libraries that were access libraries that were purposely made not in conjunction with the city and not in conjunction with schools, so that if somebody were to take over those spaces and didn't want things to occur, it would still be in the hands of community centers. And so those libraries were created and beefed up over the years. And so those things have always been the thing. I think back to, as we organized the caravan and the libraries and citizens that have occurred, those are all strategies and practices from SNCC. None of that's new. We just looked at what was the guidebooks from before and reapplied those things to now, because, oh, look, the things that were happening before are happening again now. And so it's this resurgence of what these things need to be and how can we communicate at a bare bones level with one another to create these necessities, these moments of joy, these moments of sharing that are pivotal. I can guarantee you, for the youth that are now in middle school and high school, probably upper elementary, they'll remember what's happening to their schools and their books. And when they get older, they'll make the change that's necessary because they don't want this to happen to their kids as they get older.
Stephen or Camila, back to that question of how else the arts are reflecting some of that sense of powerlessness, but also arts for remedying some of that. Is there any examples that you think of?
Yeah. I mean, going back to Renaissance days, the king and queen kind of gave money to the painter, right? And they ran the show and they wanted their portrait and they were always given out. Artists have always been somebody that records what's happening at the moment, that brings subject matter to relevance and captures history, right? That's kind of our job, to tell you what we're feeling as a collective, as a community, but also throw in our own opinion on how we could do better. Or have you examined this correctly? Or if you thought this, should you think that? And that's kind of the role of art in a lot of ways. It brings beauty, but like you said, we should think. I don't think you just swipe through the museum and just walk through and swipe and swipe and swipe. Look at the hours that are behind that work and the intent or the idea that was building something for you to reflect on. And I don't think we do that enough, but we should. And that's the role of an artist. He's not only an educator, but a historian. He marks a lot of things, or she marks a lot of things. And I think people dismiss it as like, you know, we're playing with a beret in our head and we're running around eating French bread. That's not what's happening. It's that we really care about what we do, and it's our moment to really relax, and that work that we put out, you know, makes us proud of saying something good, or bringing attention to something bad or something we feel. And I think that's the ongoing role of an artist in a community setting and in democracy.
Yeah, I mean, building off of what both of you guys said, I see myself a lot in both of those things. I think that recently, as I begin this journey of being an artist, I've examined myself, and I feel that I'm a witness, and that's my role in this place and in this time, with this ability and this privilege to witness and do something with what I'm witnessing, because I feel like I'm in the middle of so much chaos. Honestly, I wish I could like be more hopeful, but for now, like you said, like archiving these moments of people that are living these things are really valuable. And also on a personal level, I also think that creating those spaces to create truly from like play and creativity, something that you instill in your students and in your program, I think is resistance as adults. I think I've been learning more about how rest can be resistance, how being vulnerable can be resistance, how making art can be resistance, because all these things are things that we're constrained from tapping into. So when we do it, it can be revolutionary on an individual level, and I feel like that is what ricochets into our communities and our democracy, maybe.
Thank you. As we close this conversation, I have one more question, but just encourage anyone in person, if they have questions, we have a mic set up here in the auditorium. You can also ask your questions at texastribune.org/ask. But I do have one last question for all of you. Any final thoughts on how all of us can be more intentional about thinking about the role of art in our own lives, in our communities in Texas? Is there a takeaway from this that we can carry with us?
Yeah, so for me, I think arts are being dismissed in schools, and I think people don't value the amount of creativity, problem solving, execution, determination, talent, innovation that goes through not only our kids, but through the process of an artist and what they do. And a lot of that mind and thought should be kind of channeled into the way that we're going forward as a country, and viewing art as a way to kind of not only educate, but give some notice to what's happening, what's occurring, and how do we utilize this? Knowing that kids, coming up in the later AI age or whatever we're doing, what's going to happen is the AI will give you the answers, but it's the problem problem-solving kids, the kids that are able to be creative and are able to challenge, not just accept, but challenge. Why are we doing this? Is there a better way? That's what I'm looking forward to. And I think art does that now, and hopefully it gets better in the future.
This is going to be a push on the public. Consider the way that we look at the arts in general in public education. Texas is known for its love and faith and athletics, but we don't provide the funding for as many stadiums as there are. There's not fine art centers across districts. So how can you engage on a general thing? Go to kids' art shows. Go to symphonies, if they're playing recitals, go to those. Fund those places that are sponsoring that art being done, because part of that doing is that they're picking up the slack for institutions that aren't doing the work that should be done. We will so willingly drop $25 for, and I say that because I don't know what the prices for a football ticket is here.
It's not $25.
We will quickly drop whatever bills to go see a football game for some high school kids or a basketball game, as we should. But consider the same dollar amount to go see other kids performing in the arts. If they've got an exhibition, drop the same. Consider that, because even artists, we have been so, trained to devalue our art that the idea of the starving artist is the concept, and that drives me wild with anger. We will willingly find ways to find scholarships for athleticism for kids to go off to school as if that's the only ticket out of a space, when we don't give enough credence to the creation of art, because it's investing the same amount of sacrifice and leaps and bounds that the kid is producing, and it's still of the body. You are still putting yourself through a thing to create art. Find ways to fund different spaces and push back against your school districts if they're not funding the arts, because it is a necessity, and on the same level as any athletic program. There shouldn't be a reason why the person who's coaching UIL isn't getting paid the same amount as the person who's coaching the volleyball team or the baseball team, et cetera, et cetera. So that is my uncomfortable pushback to everyone. Put your money where your mouth is, and if you say you support the arts, then damn well support the arts in as much and as many ways as you can.
Yeah. Camila.
Honestly, I think that's as intentional as you can be. That was really inspiring personally. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that arts need to be better funded if we're going to talk about being intentional.
Looking to my colleague Ian if we have any questions from online. Also encourage anyone who is here in attendance, if you'd like to ask a question, please come up to the mic. We have a few more minutes here.
Yes, please step up if you do have a question. But we do have a couple of questions coming in from online. And the first one is, what advice, and this is for the panel, what advice would you give an up-and-coming artist and activist?
Go. Just go do it. Just go try it. The thing I currently teach at the high school for the performing and visual arts in Houston. And the kids consistently go, what if it doesn't look good, or if it sounds good? It was like, who cares? You wrote it. It's valuable. It's not going to matter if that editor at that one magazine that you submitted to didn't like it. They probably ate a sandwich and they got sleepy when they were reading your thing, and then they rejected it. It has no bearing on anything. A local writer in Houston, Radamis Ortiz, when we would have conversations about how many times we got rejected, he would say, the beauty of all this is that we still keep a record of everything that we ever thought of. And we're worthy of having that collected as white papers in museums. And I sat back with that and I was like, dope. It doesn't it's not the no and the fear of a door being closed on you. That just means you tried. So keep going, and it'll get better, and it'll get better, and it'll get better. It's like a bike. Activism is like a bike. Just get on and try.
For me, it's the 3 Ps, right, Drea? Passion, persistence. What's the last one? Perseverance. And so in the challenges of making art or making a difference, you're always going to have the ups and downs in life. The painting might not come out. The person you had a meeting with probably doesn't show up. The things you had planned take a left turn and you need to go right. But as long as you're staying on this purpose that you want to get there and you have passion and this need to fulfill it, I think that's the most encouraging thing as an artist or an activist that you should carry, always.
I think for me, learning to take up space has been really hard, but really important and also really freeing. So I honestly still struggle with that. Sometimes I hesitated on being part of this panel. I hesitated applying to be shown in this exhibition, but I mean, you just gotta do it. Like Lupe said, you won't know until you do it, and it's okay to take up space. And I had to repeat it a lot to myself, and I would recommend the same to fellow young artists.
Great. Do we have a question over here? Please.
So first of all, thank you all for the remarks and comments. Great conversation. And what I kind of want to question and ask and get your insights and thoughts about, particularly around democracy, and where art's role is playing in that institution, you know, that we have as a country. So what we see, particularly with art, in order to get any eyeballs or attention, you have to be provocative. And that typically means being extreme. But one of the most extreme things that you can do today is not push people to get or apart, but push people together. You know, it's the resistance against division. And there's always the term. So what role does art have not only in capturing what we're seeing today, but helping us imagine and envision of what we could become?
Well, I'll tell you real quick. I think it goes back to what my friend here was saying about the schools. If kids don't know the work that goes into it and haven't experienced that, as they get older, they have no recognition of saying, oh, I know how much work went into something. I know how much time and how I felt when I didn't get what I wanted, but I kept going and doing. These are all attributes that build a strong individual to succeed. And that's not really the education that we're giving the kids at this moment. It's a worksheet, it's an iPad. They really have to have this hands-on thought. And that means that institutions, nonprofits or individuals, are hired by the school district to train teachers that probably don't have these skills to educate kids and give them an opportunity to learn in a different way. I'm dyslexic completely. You know that, JJ. And one of the things that I learned, and the only thing I was good at, was drawing and painting. And I think it's so important that we nurture these kids to come up, but also that nonprofits in the community start to make a stand as a group and say, listen, we think we should help the school districts. We're going to need funding. Why don't we all apply together so that we can do these events or do these things that encourage people to not only learn, I mean adults and kids, about how great art is and what it provides to you, but also putting it in the face of the people that can make change. And that means going to the Capitol. That means going to other places and saying, we want to show you the benefit of working with kids with cancer in a hospital and what the gratification has come out of this. We want to show you these kids that were marginalized out in Fabens and how they raised their grades and created a difference and are going to grow up to be better citizens and better thinkers by having this. But right now it's educating the public and the people that have that power to make a difference, to make change. And I think as artists, we need to create this, I want to call it a guild, but I don't have a better name for it. It's kind of Illuminati, I don't know. But what I'm saying is we basically need to form this alliance. And I see a lot of arts organizations that won't do that because of the funding, because of the fear of giving up resources or time that they can't see sparing. But that's going to have to change, and we're going to have to create a difference by actually approaching the people that can change the outlook for the future of art and also for our country. I hope that did it.
Damn good answer. I would add to it, I think it's what's art's always done, but artists need to say the quiet part out loud. And that's turning, I consistently teach my creative writing students that the way that a poem or a story hits right in the gut is because you've taken the time to craft a piece, a narrative, that's turning the personal into the universal. The minute we take whatever we're going through and whatever we've processed in that art form, in that mode, in that medium, and put it out there for public consumption, and we've hit it right on the head the exact best way possible, all of a sudden it's people seeing themselves in the art. It's the reflection, as you spoke about earlier, seeing themselves in the things and the uniqueness that this might be this one sliver of the art created in spaces where kids with cancer are creating. But look, you share the same ability as this individual. Try it yourself. Give of your time and your effort in whatever way that fits your boat, that floats your boat in order to get art done and created, right? That's part of that messaging that goes to our county or state or regional or national leaders, is to be able to see themselves in the art that's being created. I mean, hell, what George Bush started painting. I mean, that's like a part of something like, what? But like there's, I mean, what's it doing for him, right? Like it's a thing. If he can do it, hell, anybody can. That's not a jab at any artists. That's a jab at George Bush. But that, I don't know if that answered the question, but yay.
We should probably call him.
He should have been on the panel.
You had told, just to this point, you talked to me about what it also means to be in physical spaces together, kind of to appreciate art versus seeing something on a screen. Is there something inside of that, back to this question about how we come together, or this idea of bringing people together, not necessarily to agree, may as much be to challenge one another?
Well, I mean, thinking about the age of social media that we live in and this mass consumption of images that we're thrown at every day, I think, yeah, I feel like having the physical interaction with not just seeing art, but experiencing art. I think that's also something that's super valuable about that intersection in between activism and art. Like, for example, the murals or the visual, is that those experiences create like these malleable spaces for change, because something that I've been thinking a lot about is how rigid systems are, like cement or like wire. But when we let ourselves be malleable and soft, we create space for like transition and change. And I think those moments are unique to those experiences.
I know we have other questions. We need to close the program here, but I know our speakers will stay and be able to answer questions. Please just join me in thanking Lupe, Stephen, and Camila.